Aman here from Sage Investors, and this is take number 24. My last take, I talked about some of the investing themes that I'm looking to follow through on, in terms of focusing and framing my decisions for the upcoming year. There was one particular theme I kind of alluded to, but I thought, you know what, I think it needs a whole episode totally on its own, and so that's pretty much where I want to go today. For me, as I look out to see what's coming up this year, I think the most important investing event or the most important investing theme, uh, I don't think it has anything to do with interest rates. I don't think it has anything to do with where the economy is going. I don't think it has anything to do with where inflation is going. And I don't think it has anything to do with where the housing market is going. It might feed into it, but I don't think these elements are the big ticket items in terms of what could be driving the markets and what could be driving stock prices. Ultimately, right now, where I sit, I think the most important theme right now out there is really involves the future of democracy, and more specifically, the future of democracy in the United States as you're going into an election this year. The way things are sitting right now, there seems to be a critical mass of people in the United States that are into a little bit of experimentation with the whole concept of a dictatorship and the whole concept of an autocratic form of leadership, an autocratic form of government. And it's not just, the base of people, a certain base that is traditionally kind of literally pounding the table for this kind of attitude and behavior and direction. Um, I'm seeing this from what I'm seeing and reading and talking to people. This is the bigger thing, and groups of demographics of people that may be traditionally opposed to a lot of this stuff are talking like, you know what, hey, I could be into this. I might be willing to give that whole dictatorship mentality, demagogue mentality. I might be willing to give that a little bit of a go. We saw it a little bit a few years ago, and you know what, maybe, and some of it could just be a total give up thing, and some of it could just be, yeah, I want to stick it to the man kind of thing. But it's out there and it's real. And even last year, when I was kind of in some previous takes, I did talk about some black swan events where potentially, we could see a return of the Mad King. We could see a Mad King 2.0. And that's from where I said this could have a serious, profound effect in terms of how we look at from an investing perspective. One of the reasons the United States is the dominant economy, dominant kind of country on the planet, uh, has a lot to do with the fact that there is a rule of law in place, that uh, there is a democratic system there in terms of freedom of expression, allowing people to express their thoughts, ideas. We can talk about speech and some type those type areas, but there's a rule of law. And the reason, if you look at it from an investing perspective, because that's what we're talking about here, this is not a political kind of thing we're going to go into. Reason why the United States has been one of the greatest places to park your money, to invest your money, is because of the stability factor. The United States, when you look at the S&P 500, Dow Jones, whatever, pick whatever U.S. Index you want to do it, they tend to have higher price to earnings ratios relative to other indexes around the world. So from an investing perspective, you would think, well, the US is pretty expensive. I shouldn't be putting my money in there. I should be parking my money in other countries like Russia or, have much lower PE ratios if you follow that principle of valuation. Well, the reason why the United States has a higher PE multiple compared to everybody else is the whole underlying premise of economic and social and governmental stability. And people are willing, and as investors, we're willing to pay a little bit extra for that stability. And we're willing to pay a premium for it because as an investor, I have confidence knowing that if I park my money or I invest in a US dollar-based asset, I know that that asset is relatively safe. Obviously, factoring out certain risk profiles with the investment, that's one thing. But we know that if I put my money in a bank or I buy a stock or buy a company or buy a piece of property in the United States, I know for the fact of the matter is that I own it. Now, the government is not going to come and knock on my door and take it away from me, unlike other parts of the world where that is happening. These are the kind of the foundation pieces, strong institutions, strong governance, strong social cohesion, entrepreneurial mentality that have made the United States one of the dominant powers on the planet. And the fact of the matter is, going towards this little experimentation phase that the country seems to be going into is going to put a lot of these principles and all these values and all these core tenets of what has made the United States a dominant economic player under threat. Ultimately, we could potentially, this is all driven by the Mad King, and for the regular listeners too and viewers of my podcasts and my videos now, I like to call him the Mad King, because I think he is mad. And ultimately, the reality is, we just had some primaries and stuff like that go down, and he comfortably won those things. And there's a reality this guy might be back running the thing. Forget about all the felonies and indictments and all that stuff. This is a guy who could actually be back, and he's pretty much put on the table that, you know what, this is all personal now. This has nothing to do with the well-being of the country. This is all about him, and he's going to do whatever the heck he wants to do to pillage and get his revenge on people and institutions and take down these institutions that have been a bastion of stability for the United States. And what's scary is ultimately that future is going to be determined not by the entire country, but by really literally a handful of states and a handful of people, and potentially the Supreme Court, which he nicely stacked is now stacked to kind of, for these particular types of moments. Um, if we do see that return of the Mad King and Mad King 2.0, a lot of those um, foundational pieces that have made America so truly a dominant economic player, a lot of that is all, that's all under question then. He's already talked about, putting tariffs on. This is a tariff guy. He's willing to put tariffs on everything. We could start, if we follow the mind map of that whole scene, though, that's inflationary. Prices are going to start going up. So as much as we're all freaking out about inflation right now, you get a Mad King 2.0, yeah, get used to it. Be careful, be careful what you wish for. You can start seeing economic slowdowns. And then more critically, it's the reaction of everybody else. Because the first time, I think everybody was kind of shocked and over time seeing what a dumpster fire that whole thing is. And I think a lot of the countries kind of said, you know what, this can't last. This is going to be gone. Somebody else will come in, and somebody else did came in. But now seeing the prospect of a 2.0 of all of this and the whole kind of experimentation with dictatorship kind of mentality, um, I think a lot of countries and a lot of are probably game planning it right now as we speak of how to deal with this. And I think this time, if this were all to play out, I think they would start dialing the US out. And I think countries are going to start saying, you know what, that place is a dumpster fire. We got to take care of our own houses. We got to take care of our own people and our businesses, not be so dependent upon the United States. So there could be a lot of trigger events. And, that's not ultimately from an investment perspective, that's not great. These aren't good. That's not good for stock prices. Um, so the big issue is if we do see a Mad King 2.0 from an investment perspective, does the United States become uninvestable? Does it become like what China has now dug itself into? Where my take is I don't, China is uninvestable now. You've got some of the greatest companies on the planet coming out of there, printing money hand over fist, but I don't want to touch them because I don't know what the government there is going to do. And we've seen it's not a theory. Oh, well, they can shut a company down, shut an industry, target an industry like they have. They've targeted luxury companies, they've targeted, gaming companies, they've targeted educational institutions, literally snap their fingers and they've taken them down. It's not a theory, it's happened. So it's made China uninvestable from my perspective. And I don't have exposure in that side of it. And so it's interesting to see when you look at Chinese stocks, they have low PE ratios, very low valuations. Why? It's not because they're cheap, it's because they're uninvestable. There's a lot of risk and uncertainty because of the stability of those government kind of institutions. So does the US, if we get a Mad King 2.0, does the US potentially follow the same path and become uninvestable? This is why I believe this is the big critical investing theme of the year. Whatever way this all shakes out is going to really paint a path one way or the other in terms of the future economic stability, governmental stability of the United States. And so based on that, because of that cloud that is there right now, I'm cautious on this year. Um, I have a lot of exposure to U.S. Stocks and U.S. assets, but I'm starting to, one of my investing themes for my playbook for this year is really, you know what, I'm going to start, if I've got profits in certain companies, U.S. stocks. The other day, I just sold my shares in J.P. Morgan. I love JP Morgan. It's the dominant bank. It's the best of breed bank on the planet. But I banked my profit because you know what? I just don't know how this is all going to play out. And I don't want to be around, holding all the eggs in the basket for something to go crappy. So I'm looking to kind of pivot right now for a good chunk of this year, kind of pivot my way as things have evolved out of US dollar kind of assets. I do have that diversification already in terms of how I have a lot more fixed income exposure right now. So I'm looking at that. So all of that, these decisions that I'm making are really be driven by this sort of unknown factor of whether the US tips awards away from a democratic kind of mindset and more toward an autocratic mindset. From an equity perspective, I'm about stocks, so I'm always investing in stocks no matter what. Now I'm starting to look a little bit more global. I'm starting to look a little bit more at global type exposure, looking at emerging markets, especially if interest rates start tracking downward at some point. Usually, emerging market kind of stocks become more interesting, obviously, ex China. Um, so there could be some interesting opportunities there that I'm looking at. But again, it falls back down. It's a trickle down effect. There's a correlation effect that, you know what, if the US does go down a more dictatorship kind of mentality, there's going to be a trickle down effect towards other types of equities around the world. There's going to be a correlative factor. So this isn't good stuff. And I'm cautious. I'm very cautious on what's happening. And that's why my playbook is kind of shaking out for the year. And it's a really behind this potential outcome that we're gonna see. Logically, I would think that common sense would prevail in all of this. And the fact that I hope that a lot of um my American friends and brothers and colleagues and sisters and colleagues will have the common sense to say we don't want to experiment with this type of life living. Um, but there is a precedence. This guy, we're talking about Mad King 2.0. There was a Mad King 1.0. And I remember at that time when all of this, the first iteration of all this was happening, I remember somebody commenting to say, in terms of the likelihood of the Mad King actually getting elected. And I remember the person saying, "There's no way this could happen because there's just not enough idiots in the United States who could vote for this." Sure enough, apparently there is. So I'm really hoping, again, from a personal perspective, but also just from an investment perspective, that the US kind of makes the right decision here and does not allow for a repeat of this whole Mad King vibe. Because economically, financially, and from an investment perspective, it's going to set them back. And ultimately, a lot of countries around the world that have been close allies with the US are just probably going to start looking the other way and say, you know what, what else can we do? How else can we, do business? Where else can we do business? And it may end up going to places probably that may not be comfortable with. So that's my real the investing theme I'm kind of looking at for this year is just this potential experimentation that we might be seeing in the United States with a dictatorial and autocratic lifestyle. And from my perspective, from an investment perspective, that's just not it's just not it's just not the way to go. But again, we've seen the movie already. There is been a movie created about this, and we see how it evolves. And I think a lot of people are just going to dial it out. So it's a critical fork in the road moment that we're going to be entering in, and we'll watch it, and I'll be watching it and making decisions around it in respect to my portfolios. So I want to share that with you in terms of some of the themes that we're looking at for this upcoming year. That's all I got for you this in this take. If you have any more questions or anything about this, or as well as my investment coaching programs or my investment coaches courses that I teach, you can find me on my website, sageinvestors.ca. You can also find me on Threads. Just do a search for Sage Investors Nation. I'm kind of hanging out there now. I'm not so much in the in that other bird website as much. And you can find all my videos also on my website, sageinvestors.ca, but you can also find me on YouTube too. I got a YouTube channel. Just do a search for Sage Investors. And yeah, we'll find me and be happy to hear from you. So that's all. That's it. That's all. It's been another episode of Stock Talk, and you are hopefully in the loop. My name is Aman from Sage Investors. We'll catch you again another time. Take care. Bye bye.